Good afternoon. Well, following on, I think rather logically, from that discussion about the development of Brazil's oil reserve, the subject of the next panel is industrial policy. And I think it's probably one of the most controversial subjects in Brazil at the moment. And we have a great panel to discuss it. We have João Carlos Ferraz, the Vice President of the BNDES, International Development Bank, which I'm sure is very familiar to all of you. It's going to turn 60 next year, isn't it?
Not me.
No, the bank. No, you're much younger, I'm sure. But, and then we have Dan Eisenberg from Babson College, a professor of management in Babson College in Boston, in the US, and director of the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Project. So Dan from here. And then we have Paulo Resende, who is the director of Valora Investments, or at least the head of the private equity division there. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. I said this is the most controversial subject, or one of the most controversial subjects at the moment, and in fact, already outside, we're already engaged in intellectual combat. So the gloves are off. João Carlos pointed out that he thinks that industrial policy is a way forward for Brazil, not the way. So I'm going to ask him to start by just explaining very, very briefly what is, the BNDES is not the only vehicle for industrial policy in Brazil, but it's an important one. So what is your understanding of what industrial policy in Brazil is and what it's trying to achieve in 2 minutes?
Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon for all. The Brazilian industrial policy, if we look in the past 8 years, and even if we look ahead, taking the 2022 as a framework, the question is to what extent it is providing the 3 C's, more capacity, that is the investment growing ahead of GDP, more competencies of skills, labor and technicians, and more competitiveness to the firms. These are the focus of the experiments on the first Lula, the second term, and now. Now the focus is more on the aggregating value through innovation. This is the focus of the current industrial policy in a world that is where competition is going to be very fierce. So we're going to ride rough waves in the future.
Okay, where does Brasil Maior, the industrial policy that was announced in August, where does that fit into that conception?
This is the one that I was mentioning last. The focus on aggregating value through innovation. Yes, so this is the focus of the current industrial policy, and will be in the next 3 to 4 years. And I think that taking that this is a sort of a generic, but a very powerful motto. It is the challenge that the Brazilian industry has in the service sector as well, as we saw in the next decade.
Okay, Brasil Maior, as I understand it, is a mixture of what one might call horizontal long-term measures to develop capacities and short-term sectional favors, frankly. The obvious question there is why give specific advantages to particular sectors? Why not just attack the famous Brazil Plus more aggressively for everybody across the board?
I think that these are not conflicting. They are much needed to take a horizontal that will decrease the cost to Brazil is a must, and will not be sufficient to do that through the industrial policy. We need investment in infrastructure, for example, that is a large component of the high custo Brazil. So the horizontal goes beyond, it's part of like BNDES providing low-cost financing for investment for those that are willing to invest, but also goes beyond an industrial policy when you take investments in infrastructure. So this is the horizontal side. They're not conflicting because when you take the so-called vertical, every time that you put in action an instrument, it will favor more or less a specific sector. Take the cost of financing for everybody. Who is going to benefit from that? The capital goods. Yeah? But at the same time, Brazil has, we have to understand the challenge that our economy has. It's a complex, so there is no issue on specializing, but there is a challenge for the commodities, there is a challenge for durable goods, there is a challenge for the service sector, there are challenges, and we have to address according to the challenge that every specific sector has. So the instruments that you put forward will have to be adequate for each of them. You know, we had just a session on the oil and gas. The oil and gas requires an apparatus of instruments and interaction with the private sector that are very complex. Should we not do anything? Should we treat the oil and gas sector just through horizontal? Are we not? Should we not prepare specifically labor force for them? Yeah.
So one size doesn't necessarily fit all, is what you're saying, right? One size doesn't necessarily fit all. Dan Eisenberg, from your experience in this subject around the world, do you agree with that or do you disagree? I mean, do you think Brazil's going about it the right way, or what can one say works in terms of industrial policy and what doesn't work?
Well, excuse me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure if I agree or disagree. I think we will get into that as the discussion evolves. Just to put my comments in perspective, I look at the world through the lens of entrepreneurship. I've been involved for over 30 years as a venture capitalist, entrepreneur, entrepreneurship educator, angel investor, policy advisor, etc. And my question has always been, how do you create more entrepreneurship? Because entrepreneurship of the ambitious, high-growth, innovative kind has a lot of benefits. So it's become kind of a mantra around the world. Everybody thinks it's a good thing. And if you look around the world at those societies that have been what I call hyper-entrepreneurial, which includes, for example, Israel, which includes, for example, Iceland, even though it's having problems, Taiwan, etc. Whether or not there's an industrial policy, and it's partly a question of semantics. I hope that none of us thinks that the government is completely irrelevant. Of course, it's extremely relevant. But if you look from the lens of entrepreneurship and how to create more of it, you see that these societies over time have evolved what I call an entrepreneurship ecosystem. That consists of policies, it consists of culture, social culture, it consists of human resources, it consists of access to markets, it consists of support organizations, it consists, of course, of financial capital. These 6 elements are composed of what I call the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And so the real question for me is government enlightened enough to understand that it has to set the table so that this ecosystem evolves and becomes stronger. And it's inherent in the notion of ecosystem that it's relatively self-sustaining. Unless you believe in so-called intelligent design, then it has to have, there's something I call intelligent evolution, that the elements have to reinforce each other. And one of the risks of government over-involvement is that it can and oftentimes does distort this process. It doesn't have to, but it can. And that's the danger. And when it distorts that process, public goods get wasted.
Okay, very good. Can we get just a little bit more granular on this? I mean, to kickstart this ecosystem into being, I get your point that it becomes self-sustaining, it becomes kind of organic, as it were. But does government have a role, and if so, what specifically, in kickstarting these things into the beginning, and at what point should government get out of the way?
It has a huge role, and we don't have time to go into all of its roles. Of course, creating competencies in education and health and safety, and which, by the
That's
way,
all general public policy.
those are important things. But
we can all agree on that.
Okay, even more than that. There are two words. One is discovery, and another one is demonstration. These are words economists use. I think as far as entrepreneurship goes, the most important roles for government beyond those sort of obvious things are to allow the sources of capital, the providers of capital, and of which you are one, and the entrepreneurs, of which I think there's an unlimited reservoir in Brazil of entrepreneurial spirit, to allow them to discover that they can profitably engage with each other. That's discovery. That's a role. Government has a role in allowing them to discover that process. I call it, it's a little bit like a singles bar. You set up the bar, and everything else, it doesn't completely take care of itself, but relatively. And the second, in terms of demonstration, is to foster the experiments that show that they can get profitably engaged with each other, and then get out of the way. The important thing for governments is to learn that sunset clause, sell-by dates, are essential. And very, very few governments, for political reasons, are set up programs that allow them to exit.
Okay, that's a very good transition to Paolo. I mean, you're a guy with money. Do you find, and you're particularly interested in oil and gas, obviously, a big area for Brazil, an area in which public policies are playing a very big role. Do you find that helpful, that it points you in the right direction, or it actually points you in the wrong direction?
I think it's quite helpful, and the thesis of our fund is predicated on the short term, on the local context, right? So the companies we invest, they have an opportunity which is represented by Petrobras buying local up to a very large percent, 65, many times 70%. So in that regard, it does help, and this is part of what we do. And we are linking the entrepreneurs, the innovators that Daniel mentioned before, to the large companies or to BNDES as a capital provider. So at the outset, I think it totally helps. My concern is how do we evolve into the long term where my return on investment and the return on investment of my investors, many times these are pension funds here in Brazil, this depends on the companies I invest in, competitive, not only nationally, but actually long-term internationally. So I think the balance, the equilibrium that was just mentioned, someone mentioned the previous panel, is when is the government going to let the market, as Danny said, take this primary role and competition will kick in. If at the outset it is protected, I benefit from that. I have to say the companies I invest in do benefit from that. But medium long term, my expectations is that I will be competing at the same level with international companies coming in, and more than that, our companies hopefully will be able to compete internationally in West Coast Africa and whatever non-new oil frontiers. But there is, to your previous point, I think is a one-size-fits-all. I think addressing the Custo Brasil is a one-size-fits-all for any company, any sector in Brazil. So if there's one thing, one single bullet that I would ask the federal government to try to address now would be tax burden, labor, cost of capital, and of course bureaucracy. And along that comes logistics infrastructure as well. I think this would benefit everybody.
Sure. So let me just pursue this point about the singles bar, because sometimes I think Brazilian policy is more like forced marriages, rather than a singles bar. I mean, let's just take, for the sake of argument, oil and gas. Why not? I mean, great. I mean, you set up a series of kind of encounters between Brazilian and international companies, rather than fixing what looked like somewhat heavy-handed national. I mean, everybody understands that you have a golden opportunity to create a world-class oil services and supply sector, and that involves fixing some local content at the beginning, of course. But it's all about how much you allow other people to date, isn't it? And how much you try to control the process.
Well, why do you say, of course it does? Of course it requires local content. Why is that an assumption?
Because if you look at, say, Norway, which is highly capitalist, entrepreneurial, country. That's what they did. That's what Britain did with the North Sea. Do you know any example? I mean, okay, but you've challenged a news column. I mean, I got it wrong. Tell me.
I don't know if it's wrong. I'm just saying why. I think we should challenge those assumptions because there's risks involved. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't know. And I think the previous comment was quite right. It depends on the situation. You have to. There's no substitute for good judgment. The question more is how does it evolve? How do you push it? The starting point can be anywhere. I mean, Israel, when it was hyper-entrepreneurial in the 1990s, was largely socialist.
No, that's fine, but look, if you take oil and gas and supply, that in Brazil, parts of it are an infant industry. Now, it's true that, Latin America has a lot of infant industries that have been drawing pensions for decades, and they've had far too much protection for far too long. But I think there is an argument for saying you need some local content at the beginning, as long as it's limited and there's a sunset duration. But we're having an argument. You should be having an argument.
No, the point is, the starting point, as Paul was saying, is there was a directive that there should be more concern with local content. Before that, there was not. So that, of course, someone that does not have a directive in this will do, especially with the supply, international supply industry so operating so much. There was no point, on developing a local industry. Now, if you take only these objectives, for sure, we would enter into the so-called Dutch disease trajectory. Now, we have the Norwegian health on the other side, where there was concern with that, not with the past import substitution. We are living in open economies, open societies, not economies, but open societies world. So it's not the protection of the past, but we have to provide not only the directive, but the incentives for the entrepreneurs to come. Entrepreneurs know where to put the money. There is no way that the state will say, oh, put the money there, and they will follow. BNDES does not support or comes to an entrepreneur say, do that. If there is no good plans, there is no sense. Yeah, the entrepreneurs know what to do. Know if there are good plans, then BNDES will enter. Now, on taking you both the comments by Daniel and Paul, on the sunset and how to enter this. BNDES on the equity, BNDES has an equity part, BNDES part. It's an investment bank as well, not an credit. Now, the history of this is 35 years of doing that. The experience counts. Yeah? Who are you going to partner with? But there is one thing that is a major rule in BNDES. There must be an exit. We are not there to stay. But our vision of, in terms of time, is much longer than the private sector. And the development will have a more strategic, but we want to get out. Between the Bovespa, the Brazilian stock market, and us, there has been a long partnership in the Novo Mercado, developing new instruments. We have been dating Bovespa, Ambima, and Febraban for the past 2 years on developing long-term, Brazil lacks long-term financing instruments. We have been dating them, sitting, talking.
Okay, let's pursue that point in a moment, but just, do you want to come back?
I want to address that point, because I don't know. Again, I'm asking from a position of ignorance with just a very small amount of data, a dangerously small amount of information. But I would question as whether a government entity should at all be on the balance sheet of specific ventures. Why not use the capital to entice the private sector, entice the capital markets to as well? But does BNDES, I don't know, distort the capital markets by virtue of its size? I see some heads in the room nodding. Maybe it's because they're falling asleep. Is that because you're falling asleep? Does it distort by virtue of its low interest rates? Does it drive out other banks from playing an important role? And again, it's not a question of right now all of a sudden stop. Is there a plan to stop doing that in order so that the capital market players, like private equity players, will get strong and strong and strong?
Yes, that is, Daniel. That is.
So then I guess they're just going to sleep, the people who are not.
That is clearly, that is. There is a political decision that on the credit side, BNDES will stabilize its growth, that we decrease our share on the loans that we provide. We open clearly, come private sector, come. This is what I was saying about dating the three major private sector associations in the finance industry. On the equity arm, we put lots of money and we foster equity funds. We are partners in this. I don't know how much you know about the Brazilian finance industry. It's not the American, yes, and it's not the Israel with the American funds, or it's not the Taiwanese with the Chinese funds. This economy lacks capital.
Okay, let me bring in Paolo on this. Because, I mean,
Maybe some of the audience.
there's a wait a minute, just wait a minute. Paolo, there's a big argument in Brazil about it's a kind of chicken and egg thing, right? With the BNDES and the corporate debt market. I mean, is the corporate debt market underdeveloped because, or is BNDES in the corporate debt market in a big way, the corporate finance market, long-term corporate finance market in a big way, because the private sector is underdeveloped, or is the private sector underdeveloped because the BNDES is in the way? What do you think?
I would try not to answer your question, but
Before that. Just for a moment. You cannot take the venture capital industry and BNDES just as that. You have to take into consideration our past. How many countries have the short-term interest rate higher than the long-term interest rate? It happens in this country.
Yeah,
So, sorry.
But you have a dual interest rate in this country. You have the Tesouro and you have the Selic, but anyway.
I think your question is so intertwined that I'm not sure what came first. But on the positive side, I have to say, of course, Mr. perhaps knows that as well. In the last 18 months, there has been a dialogue between BNDES and the private sector, financial institutions, and a number of agents like yourselves about how to bring the private capital back into these long-term projects, long-term financing. And amongst a number of opportunities, the idea is to provide liquidity markets for the long-term investors, so the private sector can buy those long-term bonds, for instance, and not have to stay with them for the next 25 years. They have a huge haircut in themselves. There will be a liquidity fund, and once they have liquidity in the market, the ability to get in and out of these assets is much easier. So I think there has been a big change in this time frame, 24, probably late 18 months. There are other factors that have influenced that, amongst others. The amount of investments that we need in infrastructure is much more than BNDES would ever dream of funding. Right? So there is there was a period in which I believe the BNDES was crowding out the private sector to subsidize rates, and now the policy or the philosophy is changing. I'm not sure. Again, it's all a matter of how you execute things. Another concern is speaking about execution is if you look at the Brazil Maior plan, you have a protection for certain sectors. By Brazil, government can spend up to 25% more buying goods from certain sectors, up to 25%. And I would be happy as a Brazilian citizen to see that number, 25% in year 1, 2011, 20% 2012, predetermined in the plan as it grows down. So the private sector entrepreneurs and innovators have to come up with solutions how to take advantage of this window of opportunity that's going to disappear. So,
okay, very good. Just before opening up to the audience, I want to ask you a specific question. When we were discussing earlier, you were saying, I want to talk about Brazil in 2022. So here's a question to you. In 2022, the BNDES will be 70. will it be time for it to retire and go to the beach in Bahia?
No. 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 This crisis and the period that we're living has shown that development banks are needed by any society. It provides a counter-cyclical role in the economy that provides stability, provides beauty, certainty. No, beauty, I will go to Bahia.
You're going to retire.
So, but
Will it be smaller in 10 years?
Yeah,
Will it be
I think
smaller?
that's a great question.
it will be, the size doesn't matter. Depends, smaller to what?
Smaller than it is today.
Relatively. Relatively.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
No, it depends. It depends on what your investment challenges are. If in 2022 there is a private industry financing financing 30 years,
Yeah.
then
So I have a question.
yeah, but innovation, infrastructure. Who is going to take the risk of 30 years?
Oh,
Yeah.
If
One of the
conditions
things
are
that
right,
I find BNDES has a very comprehensive program for oil and gas, including some credit lines for innovation. And if I am an entrepreneur, I would be very wary of innovating with debt, right? Because the risk, if I'm really innovating, the risk is very high. So the odds of not being banked are also high. So I would go out for equity instead of relying on the bank.
okay. Ask
I
a
have a
question.
question. And by the way, I'm happy to join you on the beach as well. But here's my
I don't
question.
know if you make my type.
He's good. So here's my question. Why? So your comment is that you are supporting the capital markets by having a stake in the private equity funds. Why not, having shown that private equity is a very important part of the capital market structure, why not now sell off, auction off those assets either to the existing partners or to somebody else as a way of proving that in fact you've created something of self-sustainability and lasting value, meaning the market?
We'll take you up and see if there is a market for our.
If not, then I'm really worried.
This economy,
There's
if
also
you
a market
put money,
for the price.
It's a question of the price, right? So then the question is, are you there to stimulate the ecosystem that is the capital market, or to make money?
absolutely.
Then
We
sell
are
any
both. We are both.
Then sell
To
it.
provide the ecosystem because we are development bank,
Yes.
and to make money because we are an investment bank.
Okay.
Those are mutually incompetent.
Okay, very good. I'm going to invite Julius to join in this fist fight. Questions? Or have we been crowding you out? Over there first and then over here. What is this?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. I tend to agree with...
Sorry, what's your name?
Adriano Moral from Altran.
From?
From Altran. I tend to agree with BNDES. I disagree to the extent that they say that long-term is less expensive than short-term. It's so expensive it doesn't exist. I don't know any private bank in Brazil that finances long-term. When you get long-term, you get subsidized from BNDES. That's not to say it's less expensive. It's artificially less expensive because it's subsidized. I think the problem here, the fist fight should be with governmental securities. They're so attractive that investment banks go after government securities and they don't worry about going after things that have risks. It's a riskless security. It's an easy game. That's the fight. Governmental bonds, they give you nice returns, no risk, and that's the big issue. BNDES is doing a great job. It's the only alternative for private banks, for private companies, sorry. And I think private equities, they're starting to come to Brazil. They have an important role, but they will finance very specific things. If you need to finance long-term, if you need to finance an acquisition, you don't get that financing in Brazil.
Okay, well, you have a namorado.
It is an anomaly. It is an anomaly that Brazilians have to face. It is an anomaly that Brazilians have to face, and we'll solve it, hopefully, in the next 5 years. Hopefully. It will take time. There is no magic silver bullet to solve that. You know, as long as I, as a private person, go to my bank and ask the percentage of CDI that I can get, and not anything related to inflation, I'm contributing to that.
Sure. Absolutely. Let's have this question over here.
Hello, my name is Marcelo Haddad from Rio Negócios. It's a question to Paulo. Paulo, what's the factors that will trigger the industry of investments and entrepreneurial investment funds bringing to Brazil to also being a second or alternative, real effective second alternative platform to also to provide funds for innovation and entrepreneurship?
I think the first factor, which is demand, that we already have, right? Not in all sectors, but particularly in the energy sector. And I'm talking about wind energy, hydro, of course, oil and gas. This is already in place. So for the capital providers, for the entrepreneurs, they know at the end of the line there will be demand for whatever they're doing, be it the energy itself or the goods and services that are used to provide that energy. So this is, I think, the first thing we look at. The second thing is there enough investment opportunity? Yeah, there is demand for that. The second thing is the exit strategy. And I think Mr. Perhaps mentioned, well, if I get in, can I ever get out? That's very important to us, right? In the state of the economy, as we see new companies coming into Brazil, we see the stock market growing, there is a high degree of probability that our investment, if well done, will be either sold to another company, larger, national or international, or can open have the capital do an IPO in the stock exchange. So this is the second thing. Why I think is still lacking is, again, for lack of a better word, innovation. But it's really people working hard and creating new products and services that are not trivial. So it's just not a matter of cutting costs of doing something that has been done for the last 30 years, but really creating something new. I think Petrobras has a very important role in R&D in Brazil. As you know, they spend probably half of the R&D spend in the private sector is done by Petrobras. My concern is what's the other half? How do you grow the rest? So you being Rio have a huge advantage with FRJ, Ilha do Fundão, the research center that's been created there. And my hope is that the PhDs that are working for Schlumberger, GE, EMC, Centis, they get bored and start new companies. And that's when, by investing in these companies and probably merging them in larger companies with their technology, their expertise, you have something that's really worth investing, and then we'll reach the point where most of private equity nowadays investing in consumer, which is related to domestic demand, consumer products, some financial services, and foods, prepackaged goods. But I think we will have a place in the actual global economy as we start bringing the knowledge that you guys are creating, for instance, in the cluster around Ilha do Fundão, into the market. And by the way, at this moment, I'm looking at two companies that are international companies that the idea is that we acquired them. One is European, one is Asian company, and they want to move to Brazil and have Brazil as their production base, but we don't have the knowledge they have, right? So we don't have no technology or equipment. And the only reason why we would acquire such company and bring their operations here, which acquire this technology, because it would take at this moment too long for them to create such technology.
Okay, very good. I mean, you mentioned the word cluster, and clearly there is a cluster around oil and gas in Rio and perhaps elsewhere. in creation. Dan, you've studied clusters around the world a lot. Everybody wants to be Silicon Valley, no? I mean, but it's quite hard to replicate, and that's another statement, obviously. I mean, Stanford University was crucial there, but also venture capital. It was an ecosystem, right? We now have this thing in London called Silicon Roundabout, because, you know, we're a bit more modest. But I mean, it's a cluster of companies that's grown up, of high-tech companies that's grown up in the East End of London, because land space was cheap. What's your thinking about how can Brazil develop clusters? What's the best way to do that?
Please talk about ecosystems, because I think this is a new concept.
Right, so the word cluster is used in different ways. I think it's important to clarify what we mean by it. Typically, a cluster is actually not the Silicon Valley. That we would not call a cluster, really, because a cluster is a defined sectoral, it's like the oil and gas cluster would be a cluster. The Silicon Valley evolved without any kind of definition.
That's an ecosystem.
Right, and that's more of an ecosystem. And there, I think, you need, again, the 6 things, and I want to focus now more on the policy and leadership side of it. Labor force flexibility, absolutely critical. Reform in bankruptcy laws, ability to close companies, to exit. There's a very high correlation between the ability to exit easily and the ability or willingness to enter. And of course, functioning capital markets. The ability of entrepreneurs to meet capital are essential. I don't know if labor flexibility is a problem in Brazil. I don't know if bureaucracy is a problem in Brazil. I'm not an expert here, but from the conversations that I've had with people, I sense that those are areas in which this potential could be released, because I don't think, from what I've seen, there's any shortage of entrepreneurial spirit. The question is allowing it to express itself in ways that competitive companies that you will want to invest in and will give you the extraordinary returns for the risk you take, they will appear and grow. I think that's the question.
Do you have any comment on that?
No, I think that the investment frontiers of this economy provides a unique opportunity, taking the 2022 reference, unique opportunity for the Brazilians. We never had industry being boomed by demand. The demand from infrastructure, the demand from commodities, and demand from mass consumption. So the opportunities for entrepreneurship are huge, huge. We have to be very wise in fostering them, in taking the obstacles that are ahead, the most that we can. But there is one challenge that I think it is still ahead of us, and I think that Paul briefly mentioned it, which is the real Schumpeterian entrepreneur, that one that is aggregating innovation. One thing is entrepreneurship to do anything, low unit value. The other one is that guy that is creating or inducing the creation of something that will provide more and better jobs. And the Brazilian industry or the Brazilian economy as a whole, we lack innovation capacity. This is a challenge.
You've done a bankruptcy law, we've talked about capital markets, what about labour market flexibility? I mean, labour market reform is not even on the agenda in Brazil right now.
No, but this is something like this, but it's more complex, because if you look in the past 5, 6, 7 years, the amount of jobs, the formalization that we went through, even with what apparently being a very rigid and old-fashioned labor code, it's amazing.
No, that's
it's
true.
amazing how labor is being formalized within a very rigid system. So I cannot understand well, what is going on. I confess. Because if rigidity was like that, the informality should be higher, and it's decreasing.
That's true, but you're a high-cost country. You need to create a lot more jobs. You've still only got half the labour force in the formal economies. No? You have your comment.
What I guess it happens in the formal job creation. The question I have is the actual income of that person formal or not formal? So if only 30%, 50% of the income is formal and everything else is paid outside of the environment, yeah, it's a formal job, that's for sure, but I'm not collecting the payroll taxes because that's a way that a lot of executives find to.
You know, my reading is there is an anxiety of people to be formalized, to be organized, against being formal, dealing willing. Yes, this is a sign of the potential of this country. People want to be formal. People want, yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's true.
The whole country is going straight.
I'm enjoying it. No, the only thing is that, you put Brazil 22, ordem e progresso. Okay, I hope that we're going to be, more order. But I hope that is not boring like many organized society. Usually the order and the boring comes together.
I think we don't have to worry about that happening. Brazil will never be boring. Yeah? We can be certain.
Please. You should open a discussion on that.
I want to make a comment earlier on that. By the way, I think formalizing the economy is essential to entrepreneurship as well. You can't go and get funding to grow, to be your global companies unless you're formal. You just can't. You won't be able to get it there. So that's absolutely essential. Tax collection, formalization is essential. It feels horrible when it happens. I've been through it myself. It feels horrible, but it's good. So you get off, getting off drugs, I've heard, is also a horrible process. It feels great before and it feels good after, but during the process it's horrible. But this issue of innovation, it's a word that's used a lot. It was used in the previous session. And I just want to be clear about the relationship between entrepreneurship and innovation. I think this is not just semantics, but it's really a question of value creation. We agree on something. Oh my God. So because innovation, people think of it and measure it by technology. Technology is one form of value creation, but certainly not the only form of value creation. So, and when entrepreneurs are free of the burden, free of the obstacles, and understand they have to be forward, when that happens everywhere in the world, they create value. Not everybody is an entrepreneur, but those who do have the opportunity to create value and then to reap the value, some of the value they create. That's essential.
Yeah. And also innovation, another point, it is associated with failure. We have to, in our society, in our culture, accept failure more often if you're going to really innovate. If you never fail, probably you are just timidly innovating just for the sake of not failing. And if you, as you mentioned in Silicon Valley, for example, for every Facebook that everybody talks about, the number of companies that fail, the number of employees that lose their jobs and find another job next week, the number of engineers who say, I can do better, and then go out and try a new company and fail, is so large that they don't even care. It's just part of this ecosystem that's constantly evolving. And this is one of the concerns I have when you read either in the press or the government, the industrial policy, talk about innovation. I would like to hear more about failure as well, because failure is a necessary condition for success in innovation.
Absolutely, and this is partly what I referred to in the sense of labor force flexibility and also bankruptcy. I wrote just yesterday in a wonderful, have you ever heard of a magazine called The Economist? So I just wrote a piece called, and part of it, regulate in easy failure. That has to be regulated in. It's not just a cultural characteristic. Nobody likes to fail, nor should people like to fail. You don't have to celebrate failure, you don't have to say, wait, great, I failed.
This is in one of our blogs, right? And
Yes.
that has become a blogger for The Economist. I'm going to ask Jean Carlos to go to the comment section there on the blog.
No, my comment is honestly, we need Daniel to come and preach.
Very good. Well, I think we could go on for another 2 hours on this, I think. But I'd like to thank all of you. I think this has been a fantastic discussion. I think it's been less polite than some of the discussions in Brazil on this subject, and I think it's been more fun, I think it's been less boring, and I hope it's been more Brazilian. So, thank you all very much.